There was
Yeah.
there was a moment there where I kind of walked away like, I was 10 foot tall and my head barely fit into the room when we were trying to watch the band. And all of these things, I imagine, as I'm saying it, people are going, oh, that's the same stuff you do in a, corporate environment or a startup environment or in a, in a workplace. So, but it's hyper focused because it's your baby. From going for a guy with basically no friends to a guy where everyone wanted to be a friend because you're the singer in a, semi-popular band in a popular music genre at the time, was, I had to check my ego.
The Growth Switch, the podcast where we dive into the strategies, struggles, and breakthroughs of bold business leaders. I'm your host, Jules Fox, growth strategist and lead content creator at Aries Media. I'm here to uncover how today's top brands are scaling, overcoming challenges, and unlocking sustainable success. Now, for those of you just tuning in, Aries Media helps grow successful brands with comprehensive hands-on support for sales, business development, and performance marketing. Go ahead and drop growth into the comments if you want to learn how to do that. Now, today, we are lucky enough to have Matt Jones on the podcast. He is actually a very diverse gentleman, touring with his metal band, leading global Azure strategy for UBS. He brings a bold community-first approach to tech innovation, cloud transformation, and ethical AI adoption. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So your career path is anything but conventional. Let's say, how did your time as a metal music frontman shape the way that you lead these complex cloud transformations that you're doing today?
Yeah. So I guess, so a little background, I suppose. So I dropped out of high school, I suppose it'd be, for the global audience at our A-levels. So about 17, I managed to pass my exams just. But I went and founded a metal band. We then toured 10 years, released 5 albums, signed 3 record deals. And I guess before I started the band, I guess I was quite a socially maladjusted teenager with, very, very poor social skills. And one of the things that I kind of learned very quickly from going for a guy with basically no friends to a guy where everyone wanted to be a friend because you're the singer in a, semi-popular band in a popular music genre at the time, was, I had to check my ego quite often. And I had a good group around me who often did check my ego, right? There's no, there's no one like your guitarist giving you a hard time for taking the limelight for being the singer in the band, right? Now, that was a real journey for me as, personally, and that developed in me, a very succinct view of emotional intelligence is something that I didn't have much of when I started. And by the time that I finished the band, I'd like to think that was the thing that I took away from the most, is that emotional kind of curiosity and emotional understanding of how to connect with people, not just connect with people, fans of the band and stuff like that, but actually connecting with the team around the band. Because one of the things that when you're you're an artist and you're trying your hardest to get noticed, and you're always searching the next big thing, right? You just did a great tour, but now you want to do an even better tour. Is you have to keep the team around you motivated. And these people, your booking agent, your manager, your PR agent, the record label, your A&R guy, you are one of many for them. So to keep their attention and keep their focus on you, you have to interface with them. You have to connect with them. You have to align with them and resonate with them. And all of these things, I imagine, as I'm saying it, people are going, oh, that's the same stuff you do in a, corporate environment or a startup environment or in a, in a workplace. So, but it's hyper focused because it's your baby, right? That music is such an emotional, such a, passion project. But that's the thing that I think has kind of continued throughout my career as I've transitioned into, into tech and into doing whether that be growth for my first role in a small startup and services partner, to then going and then applying that in the biggest of the biggest, right, at Microsoft. That kind of common thread is that emotional intelligence. I think that's the thing that I've taken with me and hopefully still develop today, right? So still got to learn and grow that muscle.
Yeah. So how does that career trajectory happen where you go from music to Microsoft? What was the story behind that?
So when I was growing up, my best friend's dad was like fabulously wealthy, right? He's got 3 Ferraris in the garage. He's got this, beautiful house. And I was like, when I grow up, I don't know what that guy does, but that's what I want to do, and it kind of turned out Glyn had founded like an IBM reselling business in like the late 90s and done really well out of it. And so I'd always been quite passionate about the technology in music. I've always been, when we were recording, I'm super interested in like patching, doing the patching on the cables and the digital audio workstations and actually getting into the bones of how the music, the production of the music, the technical side. And also I'd, kind of built computers, when I was younger, the old Lego blocks, putting the CPU in, the GPU in, the STDs and what have you. So when I spoke to Glyn and said, look, I'm really passionate about the technology thing, I'm really passionate about taking some of these emotional skills and things that I've learned selling the band for 10 years and seeing if I can replicate that into something that's actually going to kind of, pay the bills and get me and my girlfriend moved out of her parents' spare bedroom. Glyn kind of mentored me and kind of helped me get my very first job in like an ed tech firm in my home city. Did really well there. Glyn ended up hiring me into his latest venture, which was like an SAP consulting organization. They were one of the first in the world to deploy SAP S/4HANA onto Azure, which was and still is a big migration rock for Microsoft. So I met a bunch of people in the Microsoft world. I kind of felt that they looked like they were having a great time, right? They looked like the business was performing really well. I thought the cloud was super interesting. And I wanted to kind of get really broad, jumping straight into the deep end into like SAP technical services is like a niche and a niche and a niche. So I was really interested to see if I could do it again, but with like a really big kit bag and a really big portfolio. So it took me about a year to get into Microsoft. I was hired, then the headcount didn't appear. Then I went through another process, didn't get hired, but got put on a short list. Then another job came up and I ended up working in the retail team in the Azure business in the UK. Did that for a couple of years, signed a couple of big deals, kind of took that tenacity, the curiosity, the kind of relentless curiosity, I like to think about it, that I had in my music industry days into Microsoft, which turned into a bit of a differentiator. I was approached then to see if I'd be interested in taking on the UBS role, reporting into the Swiss subsidiary, and was lucky enough to kind of get through that process. And I've been doing that for the last year and a half or so. And they're a kind of top 3 global customer for Microsoft. So it's
cool.
some pretty big numbers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So you've got that. And then you ventured off and wanted to create your own company as well, because I feel like at some point you came from being a creative to working for somebody else's project and becoming the top of the game. So here you are at the top of the creative game, and then becoming the top of the game working for somebody else. The only logical next step was to then.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Go do. And that ultimately is a journey that I'm still on, right? And I think that's what I'm doing and what Microsoft are so great. Kind of the culture is fantastic at Microsoft, and you hear a lot about it. And I know there's been a lot of layoffs recently, and every redundancy is a tragedy, and there's a human impact to those things. But the culture that Satcher's embedded in there of curiosity, of growth mindset, gives you opportunities to go to some really interesting stuff, right? So there's a concept of the Microsoft for Startups Founders Hub, which allows founders to get some free Azure credits and kind of start building on Azure. That also allows you access to is a group of people called the Founders Hub Experts Network, who are founders, mentors and people who can come in and talk to you about how to do things in the business. So some of the talent in there are engineers. So if you're an organization that's got a really good product, but you want to learn more about how Microsoft engineer or just general engineering best practices, there's some engineering people in that pool of mentors and experts that can come and help you talk about that. Clearly, my kind of skill set is around biz dev, growth, RevOps, go-to-market engineering, large, complex corporate deals. So I've been pulled into, I think my initial kind of mentoring slots with a cybersecurity firm in my home city called Crypto Cloud, who are building a product. Cyber threat intelligence product. So I'm helping them with their kind of go-to-market, and they've got their product market fit sorted. I'm also helping a Swiss organization who are building some really, really interesting kind of next gen causal, I can't really talk too much about it. So there's a lot of NDAs in there, but they're building some really interesting, cool AI tech, right? And it's kind of the next phase of AI, but they've got a really good platform, but they haven't particularly figured out how to take it to market. They've got a product, but not a product market fit. So now I'm helping them kind of do that. And what this is giving me is a really kind of rounded and nuanced view of the various stages that these startups are going to go through as a founder, as you're going to go through. So I'm learning and I'm kind of forming my own view. I'm forming my own perspective on these things to then take out, whether I form something myself or I kind of go jump in as a chief revenue officer for something that already exists is kind of the next step for me. For right now, I'm kind of being able to kind of jump into these really complex, intricate businesses with no kind of expectation of what that relationship's going to be, and we just kind of figure it out. And it's so interesting to be at the coal face, right? And kind of investigating how you can growth hack a business into into big ARR and 10x their revenues.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it also sounds like, you were mentored when you were young. You were given this radically good advice, not only good advice, but a good lifestyle choices and stuff like
Mm.
that. But you're pretty big into mentoring yourself, yeah?
Absolutely, and I think I love teaching. I think it's coaching and helping people understand how to do something is it's like a real passion of mine. Like even if I'm in the gym and I see someone, doing an exercise, I'm like, oh, I just love to just go over and say, have you tried it like this? And like that rewarding feeling of just walking away and they're going, do you know what? I love that advice you gave me. Thank you. Obviously with, with respect, with compassion, with empathy. And I think also in the moments when you are teaching, you can take so much yourself because you learn the best when you're trying to explain it to someone else. I think oftentimes you get into these moments when you have to reflect on how you do something in order to explain someone. And in that moment of introspection, you get to kind of really evaluate and think about the decisions and the choices and the way you do things yourself. And I think that being able to take on mentoring in a space where the answer is do it because that's just the way that I do it in like a black boxy thing like in sales is such a good opportunity for you to have those kind of introspective moments and self-reflective moments to say that's why I do it this way, and then you get to explain it. And I think just to kind of to take that in the narrative of the growth switch, I think the way that you become an incredibly successful sales leader isn't by lone wolfing it and just being really good at doing deals, right? The moment that you're able to scale the way that you do things and teach others and bring them through, take joy in bringing people from the position they were before to becoming someone that's netting, big bonus checks. Like that should be a pride moment for a sales leader. And I think that's what differentiates leaders who lead and leaders who drag, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. So, they say that true mastery is in teaching, but it sounds like, what you're suggesting, which sounds accurate to me, is that as you set out to teach, you also are teaching yourself about like looking at your pre-programming and saying, is this thing working? Is this the thing that's the best way? And you get to reevaluate your own method, which, a lot of us get stuck in that loop of just doing the thing that we've always done in the same way we've always done it. And when you do mentor others, it allows you to look at that and say, is this the actual best way? Or could I possibly improve my own process, and do it better?
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's something in that from the band as well, right? I think one of the things that I have taken from that experience with the band is being able to connect, unrelated data points and figure out the causality and the correlation between the two things. And I think when you're trying to build a sales organization and you're trying to grow an organization, I think being able to digest large amounts of data as into your brain and then find those resonant points between two separate pieces of information that seem unrelated at first, and then being able to explain why those things are unrelated and be able to teach and sort of mentor someone else into being able to get into that same mind state. I think that's where you kind of see that introspection and that ability to kind of second guess yourself, right? I think I referenced Satya Nadella, and I think as a leader, what he's done with Microsoft over the last 10 years is, I can't imagine there being another story like it. And I think the fact that it's been so, I don't want to say slow, but the fact that it's just kind of happened organically and so very organically, I think people will reflect back in 10, 15 years and think, wow, that was a journey and a half from where we were under Borma to where we are today under Satya. Has all been about the culture. It's all been about introspection, growth mindset. I want to say I dislike the idea of checking your privileges. I think it's an overused phrase, but you've been able to understand your own biases and adjust your thinking accordingly, and being hyper aware of this is how I think because of these reasons. Can I look at this from another example? Can I look at this from another perspective? Is how you kind of have those moments where you go, I get how I do these things and I get how I can be better. And I think that strive to be better, that strive to do stuff better is, something that, again, differentiates great sales organizations from the good ones.
Yeah. Yeah, and it seems like you also draw from your background in music and take that into sales. You take that into technology, which is really interesting. Have you ever experienced any overlap? In other words, when you're working with the Microsoft crowd, has anybody ever recognized you from the metal days and been like, "Hey, wait a minute. I know you."
So there was one quite funny moment. So this was maybe 7 or 8 years ago. So it was still pretty fresh, right? The band hadn't long been broken up. But we were, I was out at a conference with a couple of clients and a couple of colleagues and a couple of people from a partner. There's like 7 or 8 of us. And we were looking for something to do in the evening after the conference, kind of in between day one and day two. I had a friend of mine who still works at Live Nation. He's one of the head promoters there, and he's putting a gig on at the Brixton Academy for a band called Stone Sour. It's the singer from Slipknot's other band. And I knew Cam very well, and I kind of messaged him and said, "Oh, is there any chance you've got any guest list slots available?" And Cam said, "Yeah, actually, how many do you need? We've got a bunch, and because we've had a few concessions kind of drop out." So I said, "Oh, 7 or 8 people would be great if you can. It's a big ask." So it dropped us in. We walked through the door, and we were just getting a drink. And somebody clocked who I was from the crowd, like a guy who was there to watch. I was, "Oh, you're the guy from Mark 5, you're the singer." And I was like, yeah. And he wanted to get a photo. And again, if anyone ever asks, like, it's such a compliment for me that I always try and take the time, ask them about themselves. I've had moments where artists that I've really looked up to have like cold shouldered me, and it's always stayed with me. Like, I've never been able to enjoy the band as much. It really kills the vibe, that whole never meet your heroes thing. So I try and if somebody cares that much about the band that they can recognize me in the street, then I should care enough to give them not just a cursory, like, quick take a selfie and walk off. Like, I want to be interested in them and give them something back, right?
Yeah.
I was chatting to this guy, and then somebody else recognized me, and then there was a legitimate queue of people to take a photo with me in front of 2 clients, a couple of colleagues, and a couple of partners who all kind of knew that I was in a band, but kind of didn't realize like how serious it was. So there was a moment there where I kind of walked away like, I was 10 foot tall, and my head barely fit into the room when we were trying to watch the band. And that was a memorable. That does only happen once, mind. But I'll take it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Most people don't even get that, So, all right. So as far as growth, as far as like the growth switch, as far as your companies, like, let's look at crypto cloud, for instance. We're in a weird market in the States. I know that you're across the pond, but there's plenty of weird stuff going on. I think all I hear these days is uncertain market pretty much anywhere that you look, with all the craziness going on in the world. So what's the number one thing that's holding you back from scaling your own business, and how would you overcome that?
So I think for crypto cloud, it's really interesting, right? Because their kind of number one competitor, or the model company that they reference, is Darktrace. And Darktrace have a fantastic success story inside of threat intelligence. They were just sold for like $5.3 billion. Huge. And when you look at the numbers in Darktrace, or at least the last kind of publicly listed numbers, they did about 250 million ARR, but they had 8,500 clients. So 8,500 unique customers across $250 million revenue. And what stands out for me is that's not a very high revenue per customer, right? But I know they do have some. I've done deals with Darktrace before for my clients when we've kind of co-sold with Microsoft. So when we've kind of looked at this and we've considered, how do we model ourselves around this organization? How do we kind of, drink their champagne a little bit and think about how they've grown? You don't get 8,500 clients by being, incredibly singularly market focused. They must be in every vertical and every horizontal, right? They're in SMC, SMB, they're in enterprise, they're in strats, the S500, big multinationals, and in any industry. So when you kind of remove those constraints of trying to be vertically or horizontally oriented, especially in cybersecurity, which is, it's something that everyone needs. It's not something it's often something people begrudge paying for. Although with the recent kind of attacks in the UK, we've had 4 or 5 very high profile data exfiltrations in the last kind of couple of weeks, right? So this is a hot topic. How do you think about your signals differently, and how do you interpolate those signals and make them into into an actionable sales plan? And because I kind of stepped out 5 years ago from, go-to-market engineering and RevOps, go-to-market engineering wasn't even a thing then, right? And I've come back to it now, having spent 5 years in, named account, big corporates. The steps that have come on in terms of sourcing leads, enriching leads, automated outbound, the things that people are doing with Gen AI at the cold face of sales prospecting is changing the game. Like my head's fallen off every hour when I've sat in, with Clay. I've sat in some demos with like Smart Leads and all of these tools that are around that 5 years ago, I would have been so effective with Clay. I used to spend weeks researching prospects to send 3 LinkedIn messages. Now you can do it in 10 minutes. So, but the paradigm shift, to use that horrible corporate phrase, is if the research takes seconds, how do you pick where you're spending that research time? And how can you take signals from social, from LinkedIn, from market trends, etc., build that into your pre-funnel funnel, your MQL, or maybe I tag the AIQL, or AI qualified leads, and then push them down through your funnel with some really, really well-targeted persona-based marketing. And how do you then think about that when you match that up with your brand strategy, and then you put that against your product roadmap, and you create this sort of continuous cycle of iteration and innovation? You target some, say the Marks and Spencer's attack happens, so you hit a load of retailers about cybersecurity, and some of them will message back, some of them won't message back. You do some A/B testing, you'll get some signal from that. You then feed that into your brand strategy and your brand narrative and your creative to say, well, these are the signals we got. This is how we then refine the brand strategy. The brand strategy then feeds into the product roadmap to say, well, if this is the brand strategy, these are the features we want to be prioritizing. You then have a new feature and you push that back out to the RevOps and go to market again. And then you get this continuous iterative cycle of growth hacking, right? And if you can build a process around it and you can build the fluidity around it, I think that's how you can go and grasp a market really quickly. And the fact that all of these Gen AI tools means the time that loop happens is now days, whereas previously it might take a quarter, it might take a half year to get from signal coming back into the RevOps platform to being a feature release to be back into the RevOps platform. Now the whole thing can be AI co-piloted, right? Even to the announcements recently from OpenAI and Microsoft around agentic developers. You can have agentic developers MVPing new features that are coming from the RevOps platform and do this thing in like a day. We got a signal that supply chain's a big thing now. We'll put a brand creative around it and we'll develop a feature and have that back out and go again tomorrow. Like, this is crazy in terms of the
mind-blowingly fast.
Things, right? It's insane. Yeah. But I think the organizations that are going to win and the organizations that are really going to grow faster than their competitors are the ones that can iterate the quickest, but in that structured process, in that structure, not just iterating for iterating's sake, but taking a signal, creating a creative, a narrative, a brand strategy around it, pushing that into a product and then feeding it back out and then doing the whole thing again. Crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Super comprehensive, super intelligent. I loved having you on the podcast, Matt. Thank you so much for your time. And before we go, where can people find you if they want to work with you?
Yeah, sure. So LinkedIn, it's LinkedIn is Matt X Jones is my user. The same on Twitter. And if you want to hear me talk about soccer religiously, I'm a Nottingham Forest fan, and that's pretty much all I tweet about these days, or X, whatever we call it, exit. I don't know. I still call it Twitter, right? It's going to be Twitter forever. Then yeah, if you want to hit me up on any kind of business-related inquiries, all of my contact details are on my LinkedIn.
Cool. And viewers and listeners, you're going to go ahead and see those links right below this podcast. Matt, again, thank you so much for your time. Pleasure having you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, cool. Sure.